Okay, welcome everybody. Good morning. This is our Wandering Through the Big Book session number 3. We really are spending probably 4 or 5 sessions before we get to the book specifically, and that'll happen in another couple of weeks. I'm currently studying the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius with Robin and on my own, and they have what they call preparation days, which is stuff that you do when you're getting ready to enter into what they call the first week of a 4-week retreat period. And so that's what we're doing. We're just trying to get the lay of the land and talk about the book and the process in some very general terms. And so we're partway into that. Last week we started into the study guide and we got about halfway through the introduction. Just a reminder, this study guide is available in full at wttbb.com, wanderingthroughtheBigBook.com. All the PDFs are there. There are 15 PDFs. It's 190 something pages. PDFs 2 through 15 are tied right to the book. There's a page number of the book in the left-hand column so that you can go back and forth between the study guide and the book. But the introduction that we're talking about now is not tied to the book. It's just something that we have to go through. And we have been going through the primary purpose of the study guide, and some reasons to get grounded in the book, as well as this idea of using the book. You could use the book one-on-one, I mean, one person with another. You could also use the book as a small group. There are 25 meetings laid out, and there are 25 directions for what to read and some homework to do. And so what we're now starting into an overview of the steps. I'm on introduction. The bottom of the page would say introduction, 20 pages, and this is page 7. And these are 2 attempts to run through the steps in the book in a general way, and it's also an opportunity for me to put some things that are buried in the step, things that are not specifically the book. So you may see that if you look at those pages. So the biggest overview of this approach to it is the idea of trust God, clean house, help others. That the decision to trust God is essentially a 3rd step decision. It's also a decision to treat the disease. One of the other ways that Joe and Charlie approach this whole deal is that step 1 is the problem, step 2 is the solution, and step 3 is the decision to treat the disease. And then steps 4 through 9 are the first part of that treatment, where we're trying to get to conscious contact, something that we know is conscious contact, that we feel guidance or power or presence or something from this spiritual, whatever it is. We feel it in an unmistakable way, and we call that conscious contact. That's going on all the time, but we're not conscious of it. Most of us are in unconscious contact, and we're even, most of us are living our lives based on our unconscious minds, based on our old ideas, based on all this stuff that's going on beneath the level of consciousness. So we can't even get to this spiritual presence, if you want to call it that, because we're really hung up in the workings of our own mind. And I love things that summarize this whole thing, and one of them is before the 3rd step decision. It's on page 62 of the big book. You don't have to turn there. I'm just telling you that's where this thing is. 62, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. My selfish thinking, behavior, me being at the center of my life, that's the root of my troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some point in the past, we've made a decision based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. This is the problem. And then it's going to say, it says this most amazing thing. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. You know, the first lie of resentment is that I am unhappy, but it's not my fault. It's your fault. If you would behave differently, I could be happy. That's a serious act of self-delusion. That's an intellectual mind explaining my unhappiness because of your behavior. And it's an act of self-delusion. And notice up top it said 100 forms of fear. That's the primary problem. Self-delusion, which is I fool myself as to what a solution to my problem is. I tell myself if the world would be different, I could be happy. And then I go try to make the world different by resenting you or being annoyed with you or hateful toward you, whatever it is. Our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example. Not just an example, an extreme example of self-will run riot. And what? We don't think so. You know, that's key. I love it when he does something like that. He throws something at you, and then he throws in a little twist. I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, and to compound the problem, I don't think so. Now, the painful part of this thing is looking at our resentments and our fear and our sense of remorse, which is self-pity about our selfish conduct. That's the hardest part of this thing. And most of us, you know, the mind is so delusive. It tells us somehow that if I ignore it, it'll go away. If I ignore my resentments and my fear and my sense of remorse, somehow that'll make things better. Any rate, so we're extreme examples of self-will run riot. We don't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. It's saying above everything. You know, my self-centered point of view is my problem. And it's why the service component of our process is so important. We must, or it kills us. And it says God, which is probably might be unfortunate. I don't know. It's lack of power is always our dilemma. It always comes down to lack of power. And the problem is most of us are always barking up the wrong tree. You know, we're barking up the human power tree, trying to get human power to relieve our fear problem, and it doesn't work. So spiritual power is going to make that possible. And then the question is, well, how do I gain access to spiritual power? And then the hard part is we have to go through this grueling process of self-examination, self-disclosure, which is an important part of it, that I'm not just thinking it myself, I'm actually disclosing it to another human being and therefore by that way to my higher power in step 5. And that's not the end, you know, that's not the end. Then we're trying to put a handle on these, give them names, these character defects, give them names. And then we actively pray for their removal. You know, the whole thing comes down to relieve me of the bondage of self so I can better be the person you want me to be. But I have to be relieved of these old ideas of what's wrong in my life before I can actually hear anything from this spiritual realm. So we pray for the removal of these defects, and we ask for direction in the opposite of them. I'm telling you that when it says in step 9, so we ask each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. That's it. My character defects are impatient, judgmental, intolerant, unkind, which is selfish, and frightened, which is the opposite of loving. So, and then I don't know why he's soft, but there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without God's aid. I don't know why he soft pedals it, because so often, other times, it's a stronger statement. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Why not? Why can't we live up to them? Because we lack power, because we lack spiritual power. One of the things that Emmett Fox says that has been so important for me is that if you are acting in accordance with God's guidance for your life in any area of your life, you can claim the power to do what God is guiding you to do. It's critical. If lack of power is my dilemma, then how am I going to get power? Well, the first thing is I've got to confirm that my higher power wants me to behave in a certain way, no matter what it is. Whether you're getting dressed in the morning or driving to work or interacting with another child of God or whatever it is that you're doing. You know, do you want me to be patient, tolerant, kind, and loving? Do you want me to drive safely and not climb up somebody's backside on the road because they're going too slow as far as I'm concerned? You know, do you want me being surly in the checkout line when somebody's got 15 items and it clearly says 10 items or less? You know, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to be? And then you claim the power. It's critical. Okay. This is that, let's see. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness so much by wishing or trying on our own power, because lack of power is our dilemma. We've got to get spiritual power. This is the how and the why of it. And then they say this wonderful, I've been told you call these aphorisms. An aphorism is a short saying that contains lots of information. And here we get a 3-step statement of our 12 steps all rolled up into a couple of phrases. And that is, first of all, quit playing God. Now, if I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, and I don't think so, I don't even understand what playing God means. I do not understand that in a real way, my resentment, my fear, and my sense of self-pity is me playing God. First of all, we have to quit playing God. And now why? You know, this is one of the things I love about Alcoholics Anonymous and our program. Why do I have to quit playing God? Not because my primary purpose is to love, honor, and serve my Creator, which it is. Why do I have to quit playing God? And the answer, because it is not working. You know, no ethereal, because you're a child of God and you got to start paying attention to God. No, because it doesn't work. I've got to stop drinking. How often have you heard somebody say about alcohol, it worked till it didn't? You know, it worked good until it didn't. All of a sudden, it's becoming, it's a problem. It's not a solution. So let's see. So first of all, well, 1, quit playing God. 2, invite God in. Now it gives us 4 relationships with which we can invite God in. But frankly, any relationship that will work for you is what you want to try to find. It suggests invite God in as your director and you're the actor in this drama of life. If you're into drama, then we're saying God is the director, you are the actor, and you're to take your direction from the director. If you're into business, enterprise, all that kind of stuff, God is the principal, you are the agent. There's a startling statement on page 49 that says, rather than consider ourselves agents of our Creator, we believe our own thinking. Here we are, extreme examples of self-will run riot, but we don't think so. We're believing our own thinking, and we're acting on our own thinking. You know how in AA we say you come in here and first thing we do is ruin your drinking. We make it not possible for you to drink because you can't drink on truth. You can't drink on the truth that if you take one, you're going to get drunk and you're going to wind up hungover and doing something stupid. Now I have to be careful. You know, I go off on a tangent and then boom, forget where I was. Anyway, so if you're into enterprise, you're inviting God in as your principal and you are the agent. If you're into feeling like you got shortchanged in terms of mom and dad, that was always my beef. I thought my dad was pretty much incompetent and my mother was just not emotionally available. So, you know, that is a way I could heal my sense of having inadequate parenting, is to invite God in as my parent, and I'm the child. And then the 4th one is a friend. So 1, quit playing God. 2, invite God in. And then 3 is, it's always the same. Do as you're directed to do. It shows up on the next page when it says, if we keep close to our new employer and perform its work well, we get everything that we need, which is just what it said in reading number, whatever it was, when it promises us that if I will quit playing God, invite God in, and do as God directs me to do, I am promised that I will experience the calamity of human life with serenity, with the serenity of knowing in the deepest sense, everything is okay, even though on a human level, it seems everything but okay. And none of us are gonna believe this, I don't think, until we humanly die and we get up into that spiritual realm that we refer to as heaven and discover that wow, I got everything I need. I'm safe. I'm protected. You know, I'm not worried about my retirement or whatever, or my physical health. You know, there are books and people that have experienced it, people with near-death experiences that have experienced this stuff. And it changes their lives because then they can wear their life like a loose garment, knowing that they are a spiritual being having a human experience. It's just if we could bring the spiritual experience into our day-to-day life, we would experience the joy and wonder and awe of creation, the amazing stuff that happens. You know, that poem we read, my work is to stand still and learn to be astonished by my life. What an awesome direction. Let's see. Quit playing God, invite God in, do as directed. So that's what our steps are trying to do. We're trying to see clearly the necessity of quitting playing God, and also to see the effects of what happens when we do play God. Because when I'm playing God in terms of resentment and fear and self-pity, remorse over my selfish behavior, do I feel good? You know, why it's so important, and this is a fundamental part of this whole Ignatian thing. It's so important to acknowledge how my actions make me feel, and how so often you will hear people say in our meetings, I was having a lousy day. I called I called another alcoholic on the phone, and my sponsor had told me, don't tell them how you're doing, ask them how they are doing. And in that simple act of being open to another person's pain, I get relief. All of a sudden, my obsessive self-centeredness turns in the direction of another child of God, and I get relief. Or how often have you heard, so I didn't want to come tonight. I didn't want to come tonight, and I'm glad I did, because I heard something. You know, that's the purpose of our meetings. Okay, I'm getting a little long-winded, and no, just one other thing. So backing up in the book to page 51, it says something that I think is easy to miss. And bear in mind, this is right before the bedevilments. You know, you could, if you wanted to talk about anything with somebody, you could go to the bedevilments and say, you know, how are you doing? How are you doing with these things? How are you doing with personal relationships? How are you doing with your emotional nature? Are you a prey to misery and depression? Can you make a living that is satisfying? Do you have a feeling of uselessness? Are you full of fear? Are you unhappy? Do you feel you can be of real help to other people? You know, so often when people struggle with, well, no, I'm comfortable with my life. It's okay. You know, I'll take this. You go to those bedevilments, and some things can change. So this is right before that. It's at the top of the page before that, and it starts on the previous page. But well, here are thousands. I'm on bottom of 50. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. That means they're not monks and nuns cloistered in monasteries thinking about God all day long. You know, they are in the world doing what we do. Traffic jams, income taxes, all this stuff. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare, that means they're not emotionally, they're flatly declaring as a matter of fact that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power. They're giving us directions here. You know, first is, do you believe, or are you even willing to believe, that the people that talk about spiritual power are not lying in order to manipulate you? You know, are you even willing to believe that? That's a yes or no question. Since they have come to believe, and then this third step decision is a decision to try to make that a larger reality than it is. To take certain attitude toward that power. My sponsor drilled it every time I saw the word attitude, HOW, how it works, honest, open, willing. Honest is a mental thing. Open is a emotional, just open instead of trying to self-justify, and willing to do stuff I don't want to do. Take a certain attitude toward that power to do certain simple things, like learn to pray and think about other people. There are two fairly simple things. There has been a revolutionary change. revolutionary. Most of us we have to look back a little bit of a ways to see that already happening in our lives. But frankly, it happens the day you stop drinking. That is a revolutionary change. Although usually there's a lot of misery that comes after those, in those early days of stopping drinking. Revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking in the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources. This is the acknowledgement of lack of power. They found a new, now here's the positive stuff. They found a new power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after. You can strike the word wholeheartedly. It's half-heartedly, I'll tell you. Soon after, they met a few simple requirements. Quit playing God, invite God in, do as directed. Those are the simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, that means struggling with the bedevilments. They show the underlying reason why they were making heavy going of life, leaving aside the alcohol problem. Now they're sober and they're telling you why they're making heavy going of life. Leaving aside alcohol, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. And I read all that to read this. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their life, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I would submit to you that when we go to meetings of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, if this program and process has worked for you, that our job is saying that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of my life. Not my name, not my address, not what I do, not the size of my bank account, nothing else. The presence of God is the most important fact of my life. And the promise is, if I can humbly rely on that and do as I'm directed to do, I will experience serenity instead of calamity. Okay, so I'm trying to, I got a big mouth. So I'm looking at this introduction, and it breaks them into three components: steps 1, 2, and 3, the information, consideration, and decision to trust God steps. That's at the top of page 7 of the introduction. Second section, steps 4 through 9, the house cleaning steps. This is how we treat the mental aspect of our disease. And finally, steps 10, 11, and 12 every day, the help others and way of life steps. So this is just trying to give you an overview of the process of these steps. And as we've said in here before, we do this new way of life really starts with 10, 11, and 12 every day. So we're really doing everything else to get to 10. That's the beginning of our spiritual development. It's important to remember that, because and we're not supposed to get stuck in 4 through 9. A primary job of a sponsor is to keep you going in those steps and not allow you to get stuck. That's a hard thing. I know it's hard for me. Okay, so then in this introduction to the study guide, there's this thing called skimming through the big book. We're not gonna do that right now. But we may do that next week. So I'm turning and just trying to help you get grounded in this book. So I'm looking at a 2-page spread. It's introduction, page 12, and introduction, page 13. And on page 12, placed side by side, is the title page of a 3rd edition before they took out the circle and the triangle, as well as a table of contents from that 3rd edition. And the rest of the study guide goes through this thing called the teaching of the triangle, and I should say teaching of the circle and the triangle, because the circle and the triangle are a symbolic representation of the 4 primary components of our process of growing along spiritual lines and coming into relationship with God. So the sides of the triangle are labeled unity, recovery, and service, and the circle represents prayer and meditation, and serenity. Sometimes it's called the serenity symbol, this thing is called. So, and how it works talks about rarely does somebody fail if they thoroughly follow this path. It raises the question, well, what's thoroughly following the path? Well, thoroughly following the path means unity, which are the meetings of the fellowship itself, and our relationship with that community of like-minded people who are trying to grow along spiritual lines. Recovery, which means going through the information in a one-to-one manner, one alcoholic with another, whether it's called sponsor or not called sponsor. That's, as I've said often, the book does not use the word sponsor in this 1st edition. It's in the stories, but it's not in the 1st edition. Although trying to help another in recovery is a vital and primary function of this thing. And finally, service, which just means operating under the influence of God instead of operating under the influence of my ego. It means I'm going to God, asking the 10th step question: how can I best serve thee today? In fact, when step 11 says on awakening, we consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to divorce our thinking from all this self-pity, self-delusion, self-seeking. And under those conditions, we can use our brains with assurance. The real question to be on our mind is, today, God, as I go grocery shopping, I go to this meeting, I meet with so-and-so, I do some task, chop wood, carry water, whatever it is I'm doing. How can I best serve you while I'm doing that stuff? How can I best serve you? That's what step 10 says is the only thing I'm actually supposed to be thinking about. Can I do that? Of course not. I got a lot going on up here. I got a lot of busy things going on up here that I got to solve with my self-reliance. I can't take the time to deal with this question, how can I best serve you? That's a little whatever, but so the circle is serious prayer and meditation. And in the beginning, when you're starting into this thing, using the daily readers, particularly daily reflections in the 24-hour book. And if you want Emmett Fox, a wonderful reader, it is a great way to develop the habit of if you're not capable of considering your plans for the day and asking God to direct your thinking, using these readers is a wonderful idea and can help you. So let's see. Circle, prayer and meditation. Praying only for knowledge of how God wants me living my life, of the person God wants me to be. That line in the sex conduct inventory, we ask God to mold our ideals. It's not just sexual ideals, it's behavioral ideals, it's financial ideals, it's emotional ideals, it's parenting ideals, it's children, whatever. We ask God to mold our ideals and help us, give us the power to live up to them. It's just it is a revolutionary, different way of life than self will run riot, and I don't think so, because I'm so busy trying to justify myself, my selfishness, my selfish, self-centered way of life. Unity, meetings of the fellowship, recovery, one-on-one relationships with the information, trying to follow the direction of what this is telling us to do. And service, asking the question, how can I best serve thee? It's a wonderful representation. So just looking at the table of contents, the way we're approaching it in this book study is step one begins with the doctor's opinion, goes through Bill's story, which is an overview, talk about there is a solution, and we talk about more about alcoholism, the mind states that precede us slipping. That's all step one. Step two is we agnostics, trying to answer the question, yes or no, do you believe or are you even willing to believe? It's not asking you to turn your will and your life over to the care of God in step two. Then step five, how it works, that has steps 3 and 4 in it. Into action, chapter 6, that starts off with saying we're trying to get a new relationship with our Creator, and we're trying to figure out what's in the way of that. Chapter 6, into action, is steps 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11. And then the whole rest of the book is step 12. The whole rest of the book is how we take this new way of life of quitting playing God, inviting God in and doing as God directs us to do, how we take this way of life into the world, because we are not monks and nuns, and we are not living in a cloistered situation, and because faith without works is dead is a hallmark of what we do. If we can have this wonderful spiritual understanding of the truth of our lives, but if we're not taking that into the marketplace, into the busyness of the world, in our book, it means it doesn't mean much. And we say it in other ways. We think God wants us to have our head in the clouds with him, but our feet are to be firmly planted, not planted, firmly planted on the ground. This is where our fellow travelers are. This is where our work is to be done. This is rendering unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. When we got our head in the clouds, that's rendering unto God that which is God's. So I have accounting in my background, so don't you know I had to go through, and on page 13, you'll see an analytical summation of this book. And this is about a 4th edition. So the first line says there are 576 numbered pages and 32 pages of Roman numerals. Total 608 pages. Directions to the steps is 164 pages, numbered pages, plus 8 pages of the doctor's opinion, plus 2 pages of appendix 2, the spiritual awakening, spiritual experience. That's 174 pages. Personal stories are 396 pages. So if you're trying to add those all up, directions to the steps are 30% roughly. Personal stories, 65, almost 2/3 of the frickin' book are the personal stories. What's the purpose of the personal stories? It says it on page 29. Each individual in the personal stories tells in their own language from their own point of view The only thing we're really trying to do here, how they establish their relationship with God. That's the point of the stories. I wanted them to give me technical tips on how to find a sponsor, how to be a sponsor, how to go through the steps, whatever. And that's not the point of the stories. The point of the stories is how somebody got to conscious contact and the result that that's playing in their lives and the horrible situation that they came from in most cases. And then other stuff is 6%. And then it's going to go through the individual steps. And notice that step one is almost 30%. Understanding the problem is 30% of these directions to the steps. And look how fast it moves. 4 through 9 is 12%. And then note that step 12, 44, almost half the book is on step 12. And that's where, for most of us, our greatest learning really, that's where we're taking theory and getting it into practical application. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're a football team or a small business or a large business. It's always about design and execution. You know, a good plan, lousy execution, you don't win the game. Bad plan, good execution, you don't win the game. It takes a good plan and it takes good execution. And that's what our book calls understanding and effectiveness. Okay, running out of time here. Okay, well, this is probably a good place to stop. But I just, while you're looking at the study guide, go to the very last page. It's page 20. And you're going to see a bunch of empty boxes. And this is directing us toward the teaching of the triangle, and it's what we're going to talk about next week. And it's dividing our human experience into 3 aspects. I mean, they're not different. They are all aspects of one thing, but they're different. One is physical, our experience of our bodies and their aches and pains and whatever. One is mental, our opinions about all this other stuff. And one is spiritual. Now, some people will say this is the body, the mind, and the soul. That they are 3 aspects of our being that are all happening simultaneously, but you can go at them in different ways. So what this page is asking you to do is to name the physical aspect of the disease. There are a number of options. And the same with the mental, name it with the mental and name it with the spiritual. Then discover a symptom by which you can confirm that you have this aspect of the disease. Then find the treatment. How is the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous proposing that you treat your disease? And finally, the promises of the treatment. This is to get your motivation going to do stuff you don't want to do. If I'm drawn to the promises, if the idea of serenity or the idea of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love is at all appealing, then maybe that'll give me the motivation to do the stuff I don't want to do. And the goal in this is very important. The goal in the physical part is sobriety, that I am not operating under the influence of drugs or alcohol. The goal of the mental part is sanity, a sane response, a healthy response to what's happening in my life instead of the insane response. And we'll be making a case for this. When I react to my life with resentment and fear and a sense of self-pity, that is insane. And what's more insane is I keep doing what I do. There's a group in the Boston area called Old Dogs, New Tricks. You know, what a great name for a book. I'm trying to learn a whole different way. I'm trying to get a new attitude about my life. So the goal of the mental part is sanity, and then finally, spiritual, serenity. And I'm going to make the case that serenity is not actually a goal. I would say sobriety and sanity are goals to be achieved. Serenity is an indicator. It's a byproduct. It's telling me to what degree am I humbly relying on God and being the person I think God wants me to be. Because the promise is, if I will humbly rely on God and try to be the person God wants me to be, I will experience serenity instead of calamity, or in the midst of the calamity, whatever it is. So I'll leave that with you to think about. A typical name is the allergy. The physical part is the easiest. The allergy, that's what Silkworth calls it, abnormal reaction. Means I can't, how I know I've got the allergy is because I've experienced the phenomenon of craving. I know what you mean when you talk about it. Treatment, only treatment we got is abstinence. And the promises of treatment, no hangovers, no handcuffs, no forgetting where I left the car, not to mention a DUI or a crash of some kind. So thank you all for your attention, and we'll deal with those other two aspects and skim through the book. And this will be posted by Wednesday, I hope. And it's always nice to see you all. And I'm going to gong this gong, and Jennifer's going to stop the recording, and then we'll have open discussion for some minutes. Okay. Thank you, and I hope to see you next week.